Hey everyone, how's it going? I am Max with Out of Spec Reviews, and this is the Genesis GV70 Electrified. So if you guys are keen-eyed, you might have seen in Europe, this car has actually been coming out, but it's coming to the US as well, and Genesis has invited us to Southern California to this beautiful studio to take a look at it. By the way, they also have in their lineup the GV60 here. We're pretty familiar with this car. Kyle did his highway range test. We got 230 miles out of this. This, of course, being that e-GMP platform that's fantastic. We see it in Hyundai Ioniq 5 as well. And then there was G80 Electrified, and this has come out more recently, but also I think been a really really interesting luxury sedan. It's given in my opinion, the EQE and other cars some problems because it's, pretty much a beast on the numbers, has that fast charging as well. Not amazing range, but super efficient, even though it's a conversion. Well, today, of course, we have the GV70 Electrified, and this kind of is a very interesting car because it's competing, in my opinion, in very rarefied air. In Europe, they have cars like the BMW iX3, they have the Porsche Macan EV coming out. We have that too, but it hasn't come out yet. And there's a lot of, stuff in this segment that's supposed to be electrified that just isn't in the US. There's also the Mercedes-Benz EQC. We don't have the new version of that in the US. They phased that out in 2019. So all that I can think of that this competes with would be basically the Audi e-tron, which this will maybe do a little worse on some range on. We'll see, depending on the battery pack we get. Because like I was saying, GV60, right? We got 230 miles of highway range out of a 77.4 kilowatt hour pack. Well, this is going to have probably a similar battery and motor situation in the European market. That's what we're seeing. And they're saying that same fast recharge time with 800 volts. So super nerdy, but right, that 10 to 80% in 18 minutes. Well, if my math is correct, that means that they're using the same battery pack for that estimate. So same battery pack on this being a conversion of a larger vehicle. It originally was an ICE platform. It's probably going to be heavier, probably going to be marginally less efficient, probably going to be less range. So we're looking probably at over 200 miles, but somewhere less than 230 miles of real world range. So it's not going to be amazing on range, but it is going to have that fast charging. And one super interesting thing that I actually just found out, both on G80 Electrified and GV70 Electrified, is where they put that charge port. They actually hide it in the grille. I was thinking, oh, maybe they have a fuel door situation, like a lot of conversions do, but no. Here it is on the grille. I basically just pop open this guy, and yeah, that's my, here's my J1772. And of course my DC fast charging. And that's the magic of these vehicles, is they have an amazing, obviously, DC fast charging capability, being able to take in up to 350 kilowatts of peak charging. They have a decent curve. They do 10 to 80% in 18 minutes with the 77 kilowatt hour pack. That's just so cool. Super killer, makes all of these vehicles honestly pretty great for road trips. Infrastructure, being the key there, if those Electrify America stations are up. But anyhow, if I go back around, that port I just showed you has vehicle to load. Well, guess what? This Genesis GV70 Electrified has 2 spots for vehicle to load. If I open the trunk here, which by the way, Genesis hides this on the wiper, that's funny, but that's your trunk opener. So now if I open the power lift gate, well, I'm gonna show you that this car has indoor vehicle to load. That is a 120 volt outlet. Wow, cool to see that. And then your standard, 12 volt outlet, that'll supply up to 180 watts. But you see that in a lot of cars, not just EVs. But really cool to see that indoor vehicle to load with a full 120 volt. By the way, trunk situation, we're looking at, I think, the same space as GV70, but probably marginally less on here when I open it up. So I can't really open it up further. There's this kind of space for actually where you can put the trunk cover. That's awesome. And you're charging, but not much else. No spare tire, no spare wheel here. So 60/40 rear folding seats, nice to see. Now I'm gonna close the power lift gate and show you the rear seats. We'll start with those, and then I'll actually show you the front seats, which is where a lot of the goods are. But this is a luxury product, right? What's differentiating it from GV60? Well, it's one step up. Not only is it marginally bigger, but this is an even more luxurious vehicle. And if you've seen a GV70, this will all be familiar to you, but I think it's really cool stuff nonetheless. So if I step in here, such a nice space, just passively, really good noise isolation in here. Now, Genesis doesn't have the active noise cancellation standard. You can actually option that with the Lexicon speaker system. So I believe this car that we're looking at does have that, but that Lexicon speaker system with active noise cancellation is not standard on here. But if you do get it, man, I've heard pretty good things about the sound system in these cars, and active noise cancellation on the road, just like your headphones do, that's a pretty luxurious feature. I'm going to give you a sneak peek at the front there. Really cool. We'll step on that space in a second. But, oh, let's also look here. Climate controls for rear passengers. You can option ventilated seats for the rear passengers. It looks like this car actually doesn't have that option, but you can option that. So that's great to see. You do get also that fancy kind of temperature dial. I don't think it's as cool as Lexus's. I think theirs is the smoothest that I've seen, but this one is still pretty slick with that display. Now stepping into the driver's seat, and well, it's luxurious. We have a very distinctive Genesis steering wheel right off the bat. This is just their style, that kind of big wing stretching across here. It is still 3-spoke, but it's unique. One thing you'll notice, boost, right? Well, they're not sharing specs, they're not telling me horsepower and torque, but if it's anything like the European model, we're getting a symmetrical dual motor setup that's going to make 429 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. This will boost that even higher for brief amounts of time. So cool to have that button in the steering wheel. Also, you have highway driving assist as standard on this car, with also active look-ahead suspension. So it's going to use the cameras in the front to pre-tune the suspension. That's built in. Super luxurious feature. Nice to see. This is Genesis after all. You can also option highway driving assist too with that lane change capability. Now here we have a 12.5-inch 3D screen. This is an option though. As standard, you're only going to get an 8-inch LCD kind of unit. But this 12.5-inch 3D screen, I can tell you, looking in person, is really fancy. The 3D effect won't, I don't think, appear on camera, but you know, it's a nice kind of digital gauge cluster. And then all GV70s get this 14-inch touchscreen, running, of course, that Genesis OS, which I think is pretty solid. It's really classy. You can, of course, use this jog wheel here, which you shouldn't confuse with your PR&D selector, but it's easy to. That's one flaw, I think, with this interior. But anyhow, that's your selector. You can, of course, also use the touchscreen, like I'm sure many people will. And like I said, I think this is a really classy OS, super simple, kind of out of the way, doesn't have some of those issues like I think iDrive 8 has, where you have that weird climate menu, because here, guess what? You actually have a lot of physical climate controls that are fairly intuitive. They're just built in right here. And yes, you have software here with this touchscreen, but it's static. It's always going to stay the same in this configuration, so you know exactly where to press. So that's great to see. And then in terms of features, you do get the option to have, not standard, but you have the option to have an 18-way adjustable front seat experience for both driver and passenger. So that is going to incorporate basically this 18-way adjustable power seat with the posture dynamic system they have, where you actually put in your height, your inseam, and your weight, and you get like a posture reinforcing seat. And if you have active bolsters too for, like, you know, all the sporty driving you're going to be doing in your crossover. So that's kind of really cool, super luxurious, very kind of, you know, Mercedes, German, like luxury grade competition there. So I love to see Genesis doing that. Carryover from the gas model, great to see as an option in here as well. And then just the general interior design, I think, is super strong, really nice. Not as much of the obviously e-GMP carryover, because it's not e-GMP, so you're not going to get a flat loading floor. You do have this space that would have been the drive shaft in the gas car. I believe they could be putting batteries in there, who knows, but yeah, we're going to test the actual performance, and we'll give you all the nerdy specs when we actually get this car in. It's still super early for the US launch, so to reiterate, Genesis isn't telling me anything about motor specs or anything, but just to remind you, that European spec version, we're getting 160 kilowatt symmetrical motors, front and rear axles. I would expect something similar in the US, but who knows? Maybe we'll get something more. Maybe they'll give it a bit of an extra sporty boost over the GV60 performance that we have. But if they do, well, then I hope they up the battery too, because it'd be great to see more range. But that is the GV70 Electrified. What an interesting vehicle, super luxurious. What do you guys think? I wish I could give you more nerdy details today, but that's just kind of a sneak peek at it. I'm excited to see indoor vehicle to load in the trunk. That's really nice. And I'm just excited to see Genesis doing more of an excellent job converting, well, not only taking the GV60 and making these new models, but converting their existing lineup into excellent electrified versions. So we're going to have to review this, see how it stacks up. But if their existing products are anything to go by, well, the future is looking bright. So that's really awesome. Let us know what you want to see and what your thoughts are on the GV70 Electrified.